in just a moment. But for now, I'd like to introduce our second speakers. We're very delighted to welcome Gerber and Britt Iverson from Visual Editions, who come all the way from London today to join us. So if you'd like to make your way up on the stage, I'll just give a little bit of background so colleagues know exactly who you are. So Anna is the creative director of the company and has made her way to London. It's from Paris originally, but via Los Angeles, I believe, yeah. And then Britt Iverson is strategic director from Copenhagen originally. So as I say, I'll let them start their presentation now. But essentially, they're going to present to us on the kind of the limits of digital preservation, that sort of topic. Some stimuli, brilliant, yeah. And there's also the kind of angle of the content itself and the experience of using it, I believe. So I will hand over to you both. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us. And thanks. I wanted to say thank you, Amber, for exploding the possibilities of language around this idea, because this isn't at all our area in many ways, and in other ways, surprisingly, it is our area, which we didn't really realize until we were invited to a fantastic workshop at the British Library where we met Christoph over the summer on this notion of, and forgive me, but it was called digital preservation at the time, and it felt as if we were kind of brought into that conversation to maybe to stretch the boundaries of digital publications and how they might be preserved for future audiences.
And to look at what's difficult to preserve and what you preserve in the first place.
So we'll talk through a little bit about who we are and what we do, and to give you a sense or a feeling of the kinds of books that we've published, and then we'll move into a project that we work on with Google Creative Lab called Editions at Play, which is primarily or exclusively digital books. So we'll probably spend more time on those projects.
Yeah. And the Editions at Play books are at the moment being tested out by the British Library in terms of can you have a standard questionnaire as part of how you preserve certain digital books. So take this as a test case for all the work that you do in terms of curation and preservation of digital.
Should we say a little bit about...
Yeah.
So this is how we describe ourselves. We call ourselves a creative studio, a publisher, and also a reading lab. Hello. Do you want to sit down?
Definitely gone now.
I scared them away with my kindness. We started about 8 years ago, publishing what we called at the time unconventional books, but in a relatively conventional way, which is to say we really were book publishers.
They were paper-based, we sold them in a classic distribution.
Yeah, we sold them in bookstores, but they were definitely unconventional in form. We've moved away from calling ourselves exclusively publishers because we found that to be limiting against, again, where language comes in quite interesting ways. So how we define what we do is that we create story experiences that live beyond the book. So kind of thinking beyond the book as a vessel and stretching what that might mean. So it's not a book in the traditional sense anymore. It's really a story experience, which could be an event, it could be a digital book, it could be a story that you hear on a radio station in a hotel room, for instance. And we have done all of those different kinds of projects. And we really talk about our work living in the cross-section of publishing, design, culture, and technology.
We thought one of the first images would show you was, if you like, another entry point to a book we did 8 years ago called Tree of Codes. And one of the ways we brought audience into our books, we like the idea of having different entry points to all our books, all our stories. This was an installation we did with the Vitsu Sheldon Company to just demonstrate the pages, in a sense, from the book in a way that's really beautiful and almost sculptural. But the basis for that installation was the book itself on the next page, which was like this. So the outside of the book was very much a normal paperback, but once you open the book up, what you have is what we lovingly call a book full of holes, where the author, Jonathan Safran Foer, essentially carved a new story out of his favourite book, Streets of Crocodiles. So it's very much a book that you can read. You turn each page by page, but you can also just have it as a loving object and really want to have in your home because it's a sculptural object. And we have people that have never read it, and then we have people that have been to us saying, how the hell do you read it? And we have people that just read it from the outset in the bath and found it quite sort of easy experience. So it's a different way of thinking about what stories might be and what kind of experience you have with the stories.
So, like Britt said, we published this 8 years ago. 2 years ago, we were delighted to hear that Wayne McGregor, the choreographer, took the book as an inspiration point to create contemporary ballet. So what's interesting about this experience and the reason why we wanted to include it here is, other than being incredibly proud to have inspired a contemporary ballet by Wayne McGregor, is the experience was born from a book that was generated, published by us, but then actually had nothing to do with us in terms of, you know, the creation of it, the making of it, or the production of it. And it interests us enormously because it is another experience of the book. So when we think of archiving Tree of Codes, it kind of raises the question, which I think we've cleverly put here, yes we have, of what is it that we actually want to preserve? Is it that we preserve, actually with Tree of Codes you could go even into another layer and talk about Street of Crocodiles, which is the original novel written by Bruno Schulz, Tree of Codes, rewritten, really, recarved by Jonathan Safran Foer, and then a contemporary ballet as well. So what is it that we're actually preserving for, or archiving, or documenting for future audiences?
Another example of that is a book we did. We started in a quite conventional paper box form called Where You Are. It was the first ever collection where we invited 16 different writers, artists or thinkers to give us their personal map. And one of the different maps, and in paper form it literally was a collection of maps. They were like paper maps are, they're difficult to fold back out, back in once you fold them out. They were quite a nightmare in terms of reading experience. They were massive, some of them. But they were like a lovely treasure trove of physicality. But alongside that, which I think we have on the next page, we created a website which we published or made live the same day as the book itself. That was entirely free, whereas the book obviously you would have to pay to get. All the content, all the maps were freely available. And the reason we share that with you today is what was interesting about this website is it wasn't just the work being available and in some way being archived or preserved, but it was also readers' journeys to the website. So what the website did was map how readers, I think you can go at the bottom, I think, maybe not.
What, to make it go live?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do
maybe
that.
I don't know either. But essentially you capture through all these little ones down here and on the bottom. You capture all the different journeys, all the different readers coming to it. So this website is, 6 years old? But the website is growing and growing and growing and growing because it's capturing the journeys of all the readers and how they access the maps.
So if you imagine scrolling along this screen and kind of...
Should we try and find it?
Christoph, can you, from there actually, if you just click on it... So what the website does is it charts readers' journeys, and it has continued to do this over the last 6 years, to make transparent how everybody reached each contribution in the book. So what's really fun to watch is it's a live, growing, transparent archive of how the public is reaching each of these different contributions. Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, I think so.
So we thought we'd ask a question that we actually hadn't considered before putting this talk together within this context is, so what would happen if you archived readers and the journeys that they make, not just the books themselves? So really trying to stretch the possibilities of what is it that we're archiving, and also for as far as we're concerned, which isn't probably your concern so much, is for what purpose, which kind of brings us to the next example that we wanted to share with you, which is another kind of, I guess it was another interpretation of a book that we published. And the book was called Composition Number 1, and it was originally published in the early 60s, and it was the first ever book in a box. So the idea is that you can read the book in any order, which, is fine and great, and a whole other talk. But what we did
to give a different entry point,
yeah,
and to also galvanise a community around it,
is we held an event at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London called a Mass Live Reading Event. And we invited 150 people. We gave them each the name Reader Out Louder, which is very imaginative of us, and gave each of the Reader Out Louders a different page in the book. They were darted around the museum and asked very simply to read and reread and reread every single page that they were given. So the idea was that we shuffled the people, or shuffled readers, instead of pages. And what was extraordinary about this, which raises a whole other load of questions for you, I would imagine, is every reader chose to read their page in a completely different way, so which we didn't expect, which was quite magical. So some people, were standing up on tables and giving kind of hip-hop renditions of this French, 1960s writer, which was fantastic, and others were really shy and
quiet from the library.
So it was quite a magical experience, and it was in many ways bringing a book to life. But it was a one-off experience. It was obviously captured through these photographs, and we made a film as well. But the feeling of walking through and really hearing and discovering each of these different readings is kind of gone.
Yeah.
It really was of the moment that one night.
Now, this is the one that we're excited about to talk to you about. It's the project with co-collaboration with Google Creative Labs in Sydney that we have called Isn't It Play. It's been going now. It's been only been live for a year, but we've been working on it for a couple of years. We've got a new book coming out in about a month's time, which will be our 8th title with them. But what's exciting about it is to talk to you a little bit about the different phases of the kind of digital books that we brought out with them. The idea behind it is that we wanted to create books that were as lovingly crafted to live on your mobile phones as you might think about lovingly crafting a physical book. And we reacted with the creative director against the idea that you either have a very, very expensive app that, unless you're a massive publisher, you can't afford to create, or you have a quite sort of bog standard Kindle version of a book that's just a PDF. And we want to create something that play to the idea of what we get to through the magic of the internet, and how we can create dynamic reading experiences that you can have on your phone in your back pocket. So we want to show you, should we go straight into the first phase? Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
The start point was we literally want to explore what you could not print. So basically create mobile stories, mobile experiences, but make sure that every single story experience you had was something you could not print out and create in physical form. So it's almost to correct against kind of the physicality. Having been a publisher that's very much lived an idea of books full of holes and books in boxes and loving the physicality of printed matter, we went the totally other way to try and create the opposite. and put design and craft innovation into something that could only be digital?
So we moved from, so our first kind of batch of books really pushed the possibilities of what you could do in digital that you couldn't possibly do in print. We moved from that, oh no, sorry.
This is the thing, yeah.
So this is one of those titles, which is called Entrances and Exits by the writer Rafe Larson, and it uses Google Street View to tell the character's story. So the character breaks up from his wife, walks into a magical bookstore, discovers a book there that he opens up that somehow transports him around the world. And so from a tech point of view, we used Google Street View to allow that journeying throughout around the world.
And we have a little film to show you which just talks a bit about what the ambition behind it was.
Can we just press play? Here we go.
Editions at Life flips this idea on its head and asks, what if digital books had qualities that don't translate to print? We created a film that cannot be printed and an online bookstore powered by Google Play. The books harness the dynamic properties in them and designed and developed by our phone. The first book was a novel set inside Street View by Rafe Larson. Entrances and Exits weaves the writing together with the streaming interface, merging the aesthetics of digital and printed maps. For the book Strata, we teamed up with Penguin Random House and Max to create a collection of stories and related science essays. The stories complemented the rich world of illustration and music devised by comic book artist Tommy Lee Edwards and audiovisual collective Ice Big Machine.
We explored how digital can challenge linear reading. In The Truth About Cats and Dogs, authors Joe Dunthorne and Sam Riviere invited readers to switch between their diaries and ultimately pick whose side they're on.
In August Writing by Alan Trotter, we looked at how the writing itself could be natively digital. Instead of what's written to be printed, the text reacts to gestural interactions and deteriorates over time to mirror the character's progressive memory loss. Editions of Play was really well received across the design and technology media, the publishing industry and the general public, and a host of new partners are already lined up to join our experiment.
With more books in the pipeline, Editions of Play is only beginning to scratch the surface of what literature can become in the digital age.
We want to inspire the next generation of readers, writers and publishers to create.
We always feel we need to explain why we look so ridiculous at the end of that film, which is, or maybe this doesn't explain the ridiculousness, but the team happens to be based in Sydney, so we spend an awful lot of time on Google Hangouts with the team there, and it was filmed in Sydney. So that brings us to the second phase, or as we've seen it with the benefit of hindsight, is this idea of cherishing the keepable, which is quite fitting for here, and that captured that kind of theme, or that idea was captured by two books very, very different from one another. One was it's the one on your right, which is by the fantastic writer Joanna Walsh, who wrote a coming-of-age story. It's the longest read we've published in this format. It was the first time that we commissioned an illustrator. There are over 200 different botanical illustrations, and what we try to do is to bring a lot of the crafted qualities and approaches that we typically give to almost like to a hardback limited edition book into the digital book for Joanna. A Universe Explodes, which is the blue book, is the first ever book, as far as we know, that uses blockchain technology. So it looks at, and we'll show you a film that explains it in more detail than rough précis I'll give now, but it looks at different forms of distribution. So using blockchain to distribute the book, almost in kind of book daisy chains is how we started to think about it.
But again, it's a book that asks readers to get involved. You become a bit of an editor if you want to own a copy of it and keep a copy. So at what stage do you keep any of this book? There are so many different books, different editions, as part of Universe Explodes. So if you want to keep something for a long term, do you keep the very first original, which was written by T. Uglow, or do you keep some of the ones down the daisy chain, which was written by any of the people that got invited to take part?
And if you did keep the very first edition, then you would lose the whole essence of the blockchain, of the fact that the readers edit each page or each copy that they receive, the kind of activity of needing to pass the book on as part of your reading experience. There's about, I would say, like 80% of the entire book experience would be lost if you only captured the very first edition. So that's kind of interesting.
Show the film.
Yeah, Christoph, can we get you to press play again, please? Thank you.
A Universe Explodes is a book from Editions at Play, an exploration into what books can become in our digital age. It is a very short book about a parent and a story. It was sad, but also fun. We wrote it to explore some ideas around what it means to own content in the digital age, and even what we are as digital natives, rewriting our lands through the eyes of our peers. To create a book that can be actually owned, we use blockchain, the technology behind Bitcoin. Anyone read the book, but when you own it, like Jamie or John, you edit it in Europe, removing 2 words off each page as you read, not adding 1 word, and then, when you finish your book, you dedicate it to a friend. When the book is given away, we record that ownership, Jane's name and the changes that she made. Those changes are stored using the blockchain, like a very detailed library card. We call this library card a touch book. As each owner reduces the text, the book shrinks until it is 1 word on each page. This mechanic means the owner becomes part of the book for others to write over and reimagine. Of course, June, or Annie, who don't own the book, can still access and read any version of the book. After all, it is just a website. And if a museum or library wanted, they could choose to display Johnny's copy or John's. The books become unique immediately, having different successions of owners, dedications, and words added and removed. Johnny's book might be seen as one owner, but Johnny's book might be more desirable because she's just so cool. We don't know if this will happen. It's just an experiment. The Universe Explains is a book that can be owned, and also the book that transitions, changing owner, content and value, and letting us see what a digital book has turned into and into. Editions at Play, experiencing what books can become in the digital age.
Thank you.
Cool.
There we go.
So because things move so quickly in anything digital, even though we've only been live with this Play for about 12 months, we're already in the third phase of what a digital book might mean. So whereas the first one about exploring the unprintable and going against what you could print, and the second was about can we own anything digital when it's so throwaway in nature, where we are now, which we're about to publish a new book off in about a month's time, is about how can we connect with the physical. So it's almost going full circle back in. And what we're about to do is publish a book that's called Breathe, which is essentially a ghost story, where the phone and the main character in the book knows where you as a reader are. So every single version of the book is entirely personalised to your context, to your space where you're reading, to the time of day, to the world.
And also in a slightly creepy, ghosty way to your physical environment.
So it's something entirely different. And again, how do you keep that? Which part of it do you keep? Do you keep the standard version of what a room might look like where you might read the book? What if you read on the street? Or what if you read on the tube? Or what if you read on the plane? There's so many different ways to think about it, and we have no idea how it's going to pan out. It's still in this prototype stage, but in a month's time, we shall share and send it your way. Most of these books are free, so it's all about experimenting, seeing what you can do with books, and they're entirely available for free.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to add, just to kind of round off, the talking about editions at Playbooks, is they really are all experiments. So I kind of chuckled to myself when I heard T talk about, museums and libraries as part of A Universe Explodes. These are conversations that we're having internally all the time, that they're kind of areas that we're really curious to explore, but it's not so much about having a solution or a direction for it. It's playing with different possibilities of what can be done.
And one thing that visuals want to show you, this one here, it's
playing with possibilities.
These are fantastic people that we've come across, or we've had some good conversations with, called Marshmallow Laser Feast, who believe in the power of technology in terms of humanity, and they tell different kinds of stories. This is about stories of full animals in the woods that you experiment through essentially your headsets and it's all amazingly technology-based storytelling, but it's very, very different from anything that we do, for anything we've seen before. So how do you capture that? And one thing that T, who's creative director at Google that we work with, has always said is that in many ways she sees more parallels between digital culture and performances than she does through digital culture and, say, publishing industries and books. Because it's so, can you be sentimental about it? Can you keep it? Is it just a performance? And the minute there's no interest in the audience, it's gone and it just lives in your memories? Or can you keep something of it? What do you keep? So it's just something it's a really interesting debate about, is it more the performance world we look at, more theatre what we look at in terms of how we preserve, what we curate in terms of digital culture?
Which brings us to, this is just a reference we wanted to touch on in making this connection between the publishing world, but perhaps feeling more of an affinity with the performing world. And this is Pina Bausch archives, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, which are so extensive. I think it might even be the most elaborate digital archive for a dance company. And looking at, the quite prescriptive from our point of view, posters and costumes and sets and workbooks, but not necessarily the performance or the event themselves. So I guess it's that kind of tension that we're interested in, especially in this context, of what is it that you keep, which brings us...
And do you keep the story, or do you equip people to create the story in the future? And that's what the cultural heritage and the preservation is all about. Yeah, so this brings us to...
Yeah, it brings us to... we were really struck by this this quote by Jamie from the British Library, who is writing about live events. But again, we felt quite an affinity to what he says here, especially even this notion of calling it an intangible heritage was quite nice, and focusing on the idea of capturing something, and maybe that's not at all how we should be thinking about this. But we're really interested in these moments and the magic that happens when you experience, hopefully, some of the stuff that we produce, and obviously many other talented people are also making. And that's it. That's it.
Yeah, that's
all we have to say.